All right, welcome back to Self Principle. As always, I'm Dr. Hashmi. Now, today's topic is all about time-restricted eating, which is a form of intermittent fasting, and high-intensity interval training. And the question for the day is, which one is better when it comes to improving your sugars and for fat loss? So just so everybody's on the same page, time-restricted feeding is really a type of eating plan that focuses on the timing of eating. So in other words, a typical eating window might be something like 6 to 10 hours, and then you may end up fasting 14 to 18 hours per day. Now, what's unique about fasting or time-restricted eating is that it doesn't limit the type of foods or the amount of foods that's being consumed in that eating window. So part of the thing that makes it so attractive is the idea that it may actually be more sustainable simply because of the fact that there aren't as many limitations going on. And even things like hunger. Initially, when people do fasting, they may feel hungry after that eating window, but within a couple of weeks, most people in general, they get used to it pretty well. Now, high-intensity interval training, on the other hand, it's a very effective method. And part of the reason what makes it so attractive and so effective is the fact that it can be done in a very short amount of time. And part of that is it makes it easier for people to stick to. Now, simply said, it's just short bouts of high-intensity exercise. Then there's periods of either low-intensity activity or periods of rest going on. When we step back and we start to look at typical Americans, what we find is that almost 80% of the Americans out there can't even hit 150 minutes per week. So just asking people to exercise 30 minutes per day, that's a little bit challenging. And so the advantage of HIIT, and HIIT doesn't mean you have to do a crazy workout, it could just be increasing the intensity and slowing it down, can be done in less than half the amount of time that's being recommended. So because HIIT requires a lot less time, it's actually a very efficient way of doing it. So now here's the big question. What's better? Time-restricted eating or HIIT when it comes to your overall metabolic health? Well, there's a new study that was published in the Journal of Cell Metabolism that was looking specifically at this question. And the reason that they were looking at the combination or one or the other was because both time-restricted eating and HIIT have shown to be effective in other studies going on. So what did they end up doing? So essentially what they were looking at was they had 4 separate arms. So they randomized 131 women who were overweight or obese, and they put them into one of 4 groups. One group was the time-restricted eating. One was the high-intensity interval group. One was the combined restrictive eating and in high-intensity interval group. And the last one was the no intervention, or what we would call the control group. Now, HIIT was interestingly very simple. All they did was 3 sessions of treadmills per week going on. And the sessions total was less than 35 minutes per week going on. So it's actually not a lot of exercise, 35 minutes compared to what we had mentioned that you ought to be getting, which is about 150 minutes of moderate exercise. 35 minutes definitely seems doable going on. And then when it came to the time-restricted eating arm, they gave them a 10-hour eating window. Now, the study went on for 7 weeks, and what they were looking at was a number of things: body composition, their sugars going on, and things like what happened to their body fat, specifically visceral and regular fat going on. So what did they find? Well, interestingly enough, there was no difference when you looked at time-restricted eating, HIIT, or a combination of 2 in terms of the area of glucose under the curve, which meant the amount of sugar that they had in their blood going on. That was one of the primary outcomes they were looking at. But the most interesting part of the study was in the group that combined time-restricted eating with high-intensity interval training, they had a 2-fold greater decline going on in both their total and their visceral fat as compared to HIIT or time-restricted eating alone going on. Now, why is this so important? Because you take these 2 approaches, which by themselves are absolutely doable, and you combine them and you can get absolutely incredible results as part of your overall health plan. Now remember, both time-restricted eating and HIIT can be done by just about any age group. You just have to make modifications. based on people's own limitations going on. The other thing that was important was that the combination showed better improvements in hemoglobin A1C than either the time-restricted eating or HIIT by itself. Now, for those of you guys who don't know what hemoglobin A1C is, it basically measures the amount of sugar that's bound to red blood cells. So essentially, it can give you a good idea of what your sugar has been running around for the last 3 months. Remember, red blood cells turn over about every 120 days, so this is a good marker. Now, the last part of this study, which is really important, is were the people able to stick to these protocols? And the answer was a resounding yes. So when they looked at it, on the people who were following the time-restricted eating, either alone or combined, they were able to follow the plan on average 6 days per week out of 7. So really good adherence going on for 7 weeks going on. And then in the participants who were doing the high-intensity interval training, they were able to stick to it 90% of the time. So if you're watching this, what's the take-home message? It's very simple. If you want to go ahead and improve your overall health, combining a interval style intensity workout, so high intensity interval training, with something like time restricted eating could be phenomenal. Now, as you know, I do jiu-jitsu myself, and I also practice intermittent fasting with it. And I find that the combination tends to work really, really well. As always, if you have a question, drop me a note. Let me know what you're thinking. I would love to hear topics that you want me to cover in the future episodes. But otherwise, I'll see you guys next time.